We've been covering the authoritarian nightmare that is the unlawful deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a gulag in El Salvador and the unhinged response from the Trump administration, even though they've been ordered by the Supreme Court of the United States to facilitate his return. This story, for the most part, has been pretty negative, but yesterday there was some good news, which means naturally Donald Trump and the Trump administration had to respond in an even more unhinged and deranged way, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, first things first, the good news, okay? Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland actually traveled to El Salvador after the president of El Salvador, Bukele, refused to meet with Chris Van Hollen. So he said, okay, well, this is my constituent. I'm going to go to El Salvador and see what the hell is going on. Initially, and we'll get into all of the details, Van Hollen was initially rebuffed by the El Salvadoran government, preventing him from meeting with Abrego Garcia. But persistence prevailed, and ultimately, Chris Van Hollen was able to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. As he notes, I said, my main goal of this trip was to meet with Kilmar. Tonight, I had that chance. I've called his wife, Jennifer, to pass along his message of love. I look forward to providing a full update upon my return. And we're still waiting to hear from that, I believe, as we speak. While we're playing some of these clips, I will make sure that that is the case. But so again, this is a positive development because a lot of people were wondering, man, we haven't heard, he might be dead. Kilmar Abrego Garcia might be dead in this El Salvadoran gulag, which is infamous for its cruelty and torture. But as of yesterday, he was alive. Now, the Trump administration and Donald Trump's response specifically to this has been unhinged. I'm going to play a clip and show you a couple of things that we need to look at because truly deranged stuff from Trump.
Sipping what appears to be margaritas with Abrego Garcia down in El Salvador. Do you encourage other Democrats to fly down to El Salvador to meet with this illegal alien who's an accused of
I like this guy. See, now this is the kind of a reporter we like. There aren't enough of them. We got to get some more of them. But no, I appreciate that question. No, look, he's a fake. I know him. I know them all. They're all fake. And they have no interest in that prisoner. That prisoner's record is unbelievably bad. If you would go into the room, you might, if you would, Caroline, maybe go into the room and see if you can find that little slip. I wrote some things down. I don't know why you'd want to keep them, but I just, we got a little biography of him. Not a very innocent guy. Yeah, please.
Mr. President.
So again, an unhinged response from Trump, by the way, an unhinged question from, a reporter in, the Oval Office saying, oh, they're sipping margaritas. What's going on? I mean, just pure propaganda in ways we've just simply never seen from the quote unquote press pool in the White House under a Democratic or Republican administration. Imagine, we've been covering this, all the leading questions and propagandistic questions that the Trump administration has been receiving since they've been back in power. Again, unlike anything we've ever seen, Trump fawning over this guy in turn. Oh, all the questions need to be softballs and propagandistic like this. Trump can't even articulate why Kilmar Abrego Garcia is bad or guilty. He just asserts that he is, and then sends his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, to run into a different room to give him his notes. He's like, I scribbled a few things down, and you don't remember anything? I mean, people have been demanding evidence of Kilmar Abrego Garcia's guilt for weeks and weeks and weeks, and the Trump administration could have avoided a lot of heartache and a lot of headache if they just produced the evidence that was substantiating their claims that he's an MS-13 violent gang member, but they don't have the evidence, okay? And I just checked, and there has been no full formal update yet from Senator Van Hollen, although I'm sure he'll put out a video or write something going into more details. This is not the first time that Trump reacted to Senator Van Hollen's meeting with Abrego Garcia. His initial response came via Truth Social. Trump took to Truth Social Friday morning to blast the Democratic senator's much-publicized trip to the Central American nation to meet with a Maryland resident and illegal immigrant who was wrongfully deported and sent to an El Salvadorian prison without due process. Trump wrote, Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland looked like a fool yesterday standing in El Salvador begging for attention from the fake news media or anyone. Grandstander. Now, again, what he's trying to do is draw attention to a massive, terrifying, violation of due process and civil rights in this country. And again, as we discussed in a video we did with Pisco yesterday, even a Reagan conservative judge in the Fourth Circuit said the predicate and the premise of Trump and the Trump administration doing what they did to Abrego Garcia, they could effortlessly turn that around on American citizens. The same sort of predicate. We accidentally sent them to an El Salvadoran prison, and note we no longer have jurisdiction. Note we no longer have the authority or the means to compel his return to the United States. They could do that to a citizen just like that. And you could say, no, that's illegal. What they just did to Kilmar Abrego Garcia is illegal too, and it's not stopping them from doing anything about it. And as the Reagan conservative judge, as we mentioned yesterday, pointed out in his ruling, you could also do that to your political opponents. What's to stop Donald Trump from doing that to Democrats, to me, to others, natural citizen, naturalized citizen, or otherwise? What's to stop a future Democratic president who is particularly ruthless from doing that to Republicans? People need to think about this, man. You need to think about this. That's what the circumstances of Abrego Garcia's deportation are bad enough. But it's not just that. It's also the precedent, the chilling, dangerous, authoritarian precedent it creates that could also be used against Republicans in the future if a Democrat, a sufficiently ruthless Democrat, were to ever take power. It's a bad idea. So we just saw those unhinged responses from Trump himself. What about the Trump White House? Not good either. So the official White House Twitter page says, fixed it for you, New York Times. Oh, and by the way, at Chris Van Hollen, Senator Van Hollen, he's not coming back. And of course, they took the screenshot of the New York Times. The original headline says, Senator meets with wrongly deported Maryland man in El Salvador. They scratch out wrongly, even though they admit in court it was wrong. That's just, they're flat out lying, objectively 100%, no ambiguity, lying now because they admitted in court they wrongly deported him. They scratch out Maryland man to MS-13 illegal alien. Again, they have no evidence, none, that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13, and there have been multiple, even from Fox News. Fox News has repeatedly pressed Republican lawmakers and Trump administration officials because they want it to be true. They want to help the Trump administration out. They're like, just show us. If it's true, if you got the goods, just show us. And Trump and the Republicans are like, and then they jiggle car keys, hoping it distracts Fox viewers and run away. And then, of course, they add in here the margins, who's never coming back. And again, what's chilling about this to a lot of people, as Aaron Blake notes from the Washington Post, speaking of Washington Post, we'll look at an article here. As Aaron Blake points out, that whole it's never coming back thing seems to be that they're defying a Supreme Court. Aaron Blake notes, number one, White House crosses out wrongly despite repeatedly acknowledging its error in court. Number two, who's never coming back is basically taunting the Supreme Court of the United States. It signals the opposite of any intent to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return, which was compelled by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, Trump administration, you sent this man wrongly, you violated due process, you must facilitate his return. And so when the Trump administration says he's never coming back, you're defying the Supreme Court, clearly. So let's look at this article here, going into more details. Senator meets with man wrongly deported to El Salvador. Senator Chris Van Hollen met Thursday in El Salvador with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident who's been imprisoned in the country since the Trump administration mistakenly deported him there last month. Chris Van Hollen, well, that's the first paragraph there. The senator arrived in the Central American nation Wednesday and initially said all his attempts to meet with the man, whose case is at the center of an escalating standoff between the Trump administration and the courts, had failed. But on Thursday evening, he shared an image of himself seated at a table with a man he identified as Abrego Garcia and said they'd had the chance to speak. We read that tweet. Democrats have taken up Abrego Garcia's case with increasing urgency since the Supreme Court ruled last week that the Trump administration must facilitate his return to the United States because a court order had forbidden the administration from deporting him to El Salvador. By the way, if they wanted to deport him, again, as people have noted, they could have deported him to other countries. Instead, they chose to send him to the one place that a 2019 immigration judge under the Trump administration, a Trump administration immigration judge, said they couldn't deport him. 200 plus countries on earth, and that's the one you send him to? I digress. But U.S. District Judge Paula Zenas said Tuesday that the administration appeared to, quote, have done nothing at all to return him. A panel of 3 appeals court judges also excoriated the White House's handling of Abrego Garcia's case Thursday. Nayib Bukele, El Salvador's president, suggested Thursday evening that his government was in no rush to send him back, writing on Twitter that, quote, now that he's been confirmed healthy, he gets the honor of staying in El Salvador's custody. Jennifer Vasquez Sura, Abrego Garcia's wife, said her and her children's prayers had been answered. Quote, the efforts of my family and community in fighting for justice are being heard because now I know my husband is alive. She said in a statement, quote, God is listening and the community is standing strong. Vasquez Sura hasn't heard her husband's voice since March 15th, when he called from a Texas detention center to say he was being deported to El Salvador. In the weeks since, she's searched for answers, scoured social media, and clung to blurry images she spot in a government video, an apparent glimpse of Abrego Garcia behind bars at the Terrorism Confinement Center, the notorious prison known by its Spanish acronym, CCOT. The photo that Van Hollen shared Thursday showed Abrego Garcia wearing a checked shirt and cap commemorating the Kansas City Chiefs' 2023 Super Bowl victory rather than prison attire. Van Hollen said Wednesday that El Salvador's vice president, Felix Ula, had rebuffed his attempts to meet with Abrego Garcia or speak with him by phone. Then on Thursday, the senator reported the Salvadoran soldiers prevented him and Chris Newman, a lawyer for Abrego Garcia's family, on Thursday from approaching CCOT, where Abrego Garcia is believed to be held. The Trump administration has sent several hundred migrants to El Salvador's CCOT, providing few details about the vast majority of them. Abrego Garcia's case has drawn outsized attention because the administration admitted that it deported him in error. He was born in El Salvador and fled to the United States more than a decade ago after gang members tried to extort his family and recruit him into the gang. An immigration judge in 2019, again under the Trump administration, ruled that he could not be deported to El Salvador, a humanitarian protection called withholding of removal, because his fears that the gang, Barrio 18, would persecute him. A White House spokesperson criticized Van Hollen on Thursday. He also repeated officials' claims that Abrego Garcia is a gang member, which Abrego Garcia has denied. He has never been charged with any crime, court records show. Quote, Chris Van Hollen has firmly established Democrats as the party whose top priority is the welfare of an illegal alien MS-13 terrorist. It's truly disgusting. Trump will continue to stand on the side of law-abiding Americans. Again, not true. Donald Trump himself is a convicted felon, 34 felony counts. He has pardoned or commuted the sentences of thousands of January 6 violent protesters, hundreds of whom attacked the police. Donald Trump is objectively inferior in this regard, and there's no amount of spin that will ever spin that correctly. At a news briefing a day earlier, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt accused Van Hollen of prioritizing Abrego Garcia's case over combating illegal immigration and told reporters his mission to El Salvador was futile. But if he ever ends up back in the United States, he would immediately be deported again. Quote, nothing will change the fact that Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. He will never live in the United States of America again. Democrats have cheered Van Hollen's efforts. Quote, we're with you, Senator Van Hollen, said Senator Patty Murphy, a Democrat, a Democrat, even as some of his Republican colleagues have mocked him for championing the case of a man they've described as a gang member. Ted Cruz, but screw Ted Cruz, nobody cares. But you know what's interesting? Lindsey Graham, of all people, once famously said that Ted Cruz is so disliked that the joke was, according to Lindsey Graham, we played the clip before, Lindsey Graham said that if you murdered Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate and the trial was held in the Senate, nobody would convict you because he's so disliked. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but he is reportedly very disliked. Van Hollen has countered that he's fighting for Abrego Garcia's return to prevent the Trump administration from eroding the due process rights of Americans as well as migrants. Quote, we need to make sure the court system works and due process works, because if you take it away for any individual, it's a very short road to taking it away for every American. Which again, according to the Reagan-appointed conservative judge on the Fourth Circuit who wrote the opinion basically excoriating the Trump administration, that's exactly what he said too. The very predicate and premise that the Trump administration was offering and the excuses they were offering could, if taken at face value, apply to any American citizen as well. So this is something that everybody should be taking seriously. Libertarians, conservatives, liberals, progressives, it doesn't matter. Take it seriously, because the first thing you need to think of is, would I be okay if the opposition party did this sort of thing and had this sort of power? If the answer is no, and indeed it is for Trump supporters and conservatives, then you should be principled and say no here too. And if you're not, you're an unprincipled, hypocritical loser who should be made fun of. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.